Autumn of 1980, the forests and headlands north of San Francisco wore a deceptive tranquility. Amidst the rustling leaves and the whispering winds, a silent predator lurked, casting a shadow of terror over the otherwise serene landscape. A brutal murderer known as the Trailside Killer was on the loose, his presence turning the peaceful wilderness paths into a chilling backdrop of fear. The local press had coined the name Trailside Killer due to the killer's modus operandi. He targeted young women, marking them for rape and murder on the sparsely populated trails in the beautiful parks around the Bay Area. The public was gripped with terror. The tranquility of the trails had been replaced with a palpable fear that hung heavy in the air. In the span of just 6 weeks, at least 5 lives were cruelly snuffed out. Ann Alderson, a lively 26-year-old, was murdered in Mount Tamalpais State Park. The bodies of Diane O'Connell, aged 22, Shauna May, 25, Cindy Moreland, just 18, and Moreland's fiancé Rick Stowers, a young man of 19, were all discovered on the same day. They lay in shallow graves at Point Reyes National Seashore, their lives abruptly ended by a merciless predator. The chilling commonality of these murders was not just the locations, but also the weapon. Ballistics confirmed the worst fears of the law enforcement. All these murders were committed using the same .38 caliber pistol. The authorities knew they were dealing with a serial killer, a ruthless murderer who had turned the picturesque trails of the Bay Area into his personal hunting ground. The once tranquil trails, once a sanctuary for nature lovers, had become a nightmarish killing field. The fear was real, the threat was immediate, and the killer was still out there, hidden amidst the autumn leaves and the whispering winds. Yet even in the face of such terror, the resolve of the law enforcement was unbroken. They were determined to catch the monster who had shattered the peace of their community. But little did they know, their biggest break was yet to come. The once serene trails were now stained with the horrors of a brutal murderer. Opening, the authorities were on high alert, desperate to catch the predator. In the wake of the chilling murders, the authorities were scrambling to find leads. The forests once teeming with life had become the hunting grounds for a ruthless serial killer. The grim reality of the situation was confirmed when ballistics linked the murders. All the victims had been killed with the same .38 caliber pistol. This wasn't a coincidence. It was the signature of a serial killer. Each murder added a new layer of horror to the case, but it also added another piece to the puzzle. As law enforcement pieced together the evidence, the picture of a methodical, cold-blooded predator began to emerge. The killer was targeting young women, often in isolated areas, and leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Despite the clear connection between the murders, the identity of the killer remained elusive. The authorities had a serial killer on their hands, but they were still in the dark about who was behind these heinous crimes. The murderer was like a ghost, slipping through the fingers of law enforcement and disappearing back into the wilderness. As the weeks turned into months, the pressure to catch the killer intensified. The public was gripped by fear, and the authorities were desperate for a breakthrough. The case was like a complex jigsaw puzzle with one crucial piece missing: the identity of the killer. Without this piece, the picture remained incomplete. The authorities knew they were dealing with a cunning and dangerous individual. The killer was always one step ahead, leaving behind a trail of victims but no clear clues to his identity. The authorities were up against a wall, with the clock ticking and the body count rising. The investigation was a race against time, and every second mattered. The authorities had to connect the dots, find the missing piece, and catch the killer before he struck again. But as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the breakthrough they were hoping for remained elusive. The authorities were in the dark, waiting for a breakthrough. Closing. The authorities were in the dark, waiting for a breakthrough. March 27, 1981, marked a turning point in the investigation. On this day, the tranquility of Henry Cowell Redwood State Park was shattered by a chilling act of violence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellen Hansen, a vibrant young woman, and her boyfriend Stephen Hartle, both students at the University of California, Davis, found themselves in the crosshairs of the Trailside Killer. The couple was camping and hiking, relishing the serenity of the forest, oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows. In a terrifying encounter, the killer struck. his .38 caliber pistol resonating through the still air. Ellen was fatally wounded, multiple bullets piercing her head. But fate had other plans for Stephen. He was shot in the chest, yet managed to escape the clutches of the murderer, his life hanging by a thread. This harrowing incident marked a grim milestone, but it also brought with it a glimmer of hope. Stephen, the first survivor of the Trailside Killer's reign of terror, was able to provide investigators with a crucial piece of the puzzle. He described the assailant as being between 45 and 50 years old with dark hair and hazel eyes. This was the first tangible lead investigators had, the first real face to the faceless terror that had held the Bay Area in its grip. In the midst of the horror, Stephen's survival and his courage in recounting his ordeal provided a beacon of light in the darkness. He had come face to face with a monster and lived to tell the tale. His words served as a lifeline, offering investigators a vital clue in their desperate search for the man behind the murders. In the face of unimaginable terror, Stephen's resilience and determination to assist in the investigation became a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. His description of the assailant would prove instrumental in the pursuit of justice, transforming him from a victim into a survivor. A ray of hope emerged with the first survivor. A month later, the investigation took a dramatic turn. The story of Heather Skaggs, a 20-year-old woman who vanished abruptly, marked the beginning of this pivotal shift. She had last spoken to her boyfriend and mother about her plans to meet a coworker, a 50-year-old man named David Carpenter, with the intention of buying a used car from him. David Carpenter was no stranger to the law. His criminal record was extensive, marred with instances of rape and assault that stretched back several years. This history, coupled with his connection to the missing Heather Skaggs, drew the attention of the investigators. When they arrived to question him, they were struck by a chilling realization. Carpenter fit the description provided by Stephen Hurdle, the sole survivor of the Trailside Killer's attacks. His dark hair, hazel eyes, and an age that hovered around the late 40s all lined up with the details Hurdle had provided. But the similarities didn't stop there. Carpenter's car was also consistent with the one seen by eyewitnesses at multiple murder scenes. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, forming a picture that was too stark to ignore. The investigators had their suspect. They made their arrest soon thereafter. The grim fate of Heather Skaggs was confirmed later that month when her body was discovered in Big Basin Redwood State Park, another haunting addition to the Trailside Killer's list of victims. But her tragic end had not been in vain. Her connection to Carpenter had been the thread that led the investigators to the man behind the monstrous acts. John Posey, the senior deputy district attorney for Marin County at the time, credits the successful capture of Carpenter to the combined efforts of many, including the San Jose police officers and Stephen Hurdle. Posey described Hurdle as the best eyewitness he ever had. The relentless efforts of law enforcement finally led to the capture of the Trailside Killer. David Carpenter, the man now in custody, was no stranger to crime. Born and raised in San Francisco, Carpenter's life was marred by violence from the early years. His severe stutter and troubled childhood led to him being institutionalized as a teenager after he was found guilty of molesting his younger cousins. John Posey, the senior deputy district attorney for Marin County who prosecuted 5 of Carpenter's murders, saw these early signs of sexual violence as indicative of a deeper, more sinister issue. Carpenter, he believed, showed signs of a sociopathic personality disorder. Posey explains, "A lot of these personalities start at a very, very young age, and that kind of personality really doesn't stop committing crimes." And indeed, Carpenter didn't stop. His criminal record was a testament to a life lived in the shadows of lawlessness. He assaulted a young woman, Lois D'Andrade, with a hammer and a knife in 1960, a horrific act that led to a 7.5-year prison sentence. But this stint behind bars did little to reform Carpenter. Within 9 months of his release, he was back to his old ways, assaulting women once again. In 1970, he was convicted of robbery, kidnapping, and rape, marking another dark chapter in his life. Then, in May of 1979, he was paroled. His freedom, however, marked the beginning of a reign of terror that would grip San Francisco for months. As a serial killer, Carpenter never confessed to any crimes. It's impossible to say when he first killed after being released, but his DNA was later identified at the murder scene of Mary Frances Bennett, a young woman of just 23. Thus, the tranquil trails of San Francisco had been the hunting grounds of a seasoned criminal, a sociopath who had left a trail of terror in his wake.